So does this mean that Broad Match has been rehabilitated?
Google's been making a strong push towards Broad Match for the last few years, and you can see that in several places in the account. Switching your keywords to Broad Match is probably the most common recommendation for optimization score, where to smooth the path of your transition to Broad Match, Google offers this easy way to test Broad Match throughout a campaign by setting up a campaign experiment for it with just a couple of clicks. When you add new keywords, you see this option to add those keywords as Broad Match.
Just click into a keyword's match type and Google will seize the opportunity to tell you how much it recommends using Broad.
But importantly, alongside this increasing pressure to switch to Broad Match, there is also an increasingly good justification for it. Not long ago, the natural and frankly correct reaction from PPC professionals to Google's constant pushing of Broad Match was, but now the behavior of Broad Match is much less wild than it used to be. Not because it doesn't deviate from the terms in your keyword, but because it does so in a more sensible manner, with far fewer ridiculous-looking search terms that have no hope of converting. And in the data too, it performs better in CPA and ROAS than it used to. And when Google produces this recommendation to get more conversions at a similar or better ROI by switching to Broad Match, there is at least a solid theory behind it, which isn't often discussed, but we'll discuss it now. The first point in this is that match type can be seen as just the first layer of eligibility for an auction. So Broad Match will make incremental searches, incremental search terms, eligible to trigger your ad, but it doesn't determine that they necessarily will trigger your ad. Because after that first layer, you have smart bidding coming into the equation, allowing more selectiveness about which auctions you enter into. So in the seemingly incessant messaging about pairing Broad Match with smart bidding, there are two sides to the coin. On one hand, you have Broad Match helping smart bidding by giving it a wider field to play in, with all the dangers that we know that entails. But on the other hand, we have smart bidding as a potential method of keeping Broad Match more in check, playing referee to the larger group of misbehaving search terms now on the playing field, by only selecting those that it thinks will be beneficial to the strategy and targets in place, in theory. Playing that role successfully relies on the algorithm having a clear picture of what to look for so that it can differentiate between higher value and lower value auctions, hence the often touted importance of feeding the algorithm with high quality data and a high enough quantity of data so that it can make those differentiations. It's not an entirely new idea, but it's worth pausing for a moment to consider. When we talk about Broad Match casting a wider net, it isn't necessarily trawling that whole net through the water each time and bringing up the full range of search terms that could be caught within it without further discrimination. It is part of the remit of any conversion or conversion value-oriented strategy to minimize your participation in hopeless auctions. That isn't the end of the story, partly because Google's incentives and your incentives aren't ultimately fully aligned. But it is certainly a big part of the story, and Broad Match and smart bidding are working together more effectively, just on a ROAS CPA basis, over time, as we should expect them to. Next, consider this line that was delivered by a Google product manager in a workshop about the benefits of Broad Match.